Well, we're at Natural Tunnel State Park over here in Virginia off of Highway 23. And it's a very pretty place. Nice little visitor center here. They have a chairlift, but it only operates on the weekends. And we're going to take a look at some of the stuff here. The train off in the distance. We may walk up the Lover's Leap Trail. But let's take a look at a couple of things. Now, this tunnel down here, the river goes through it. And there's also a train tunnel through it. And we're going to take a look at this. It says the Daniel Boone Wilderness Trail. Now there's something interesting about Daniel Boone's Wilderness Trail, but it says Daniel Boone assembled 30 axemen at the Anderson Blockhouse and blazed a 200-mile trail through Cumberland Gap to the Kentucky River in 1775, which was the South Fork of the Kentucky River. Boone's trail provided a primitive but clear route to the lands west of the Appalachians. By the end of the American Revolution, 12,000 people had crossed the gap in the mountains into the new territory. Today, a 4-hour driving tour traces the route in Tennessee and Virginia as closely as possible. Look for this symbol on the highway signs. Here we go. Picture there. It says George Caleb Bingham, Daniel Boone escorting settlers through the Cumberland Gap, 1851 and 52. Oil on canvas, 36.5 inches or feet by 50 by and a quarter inches. Motor Lane Kemper Art Museum, Washington University in St. Louis, gift of Nathaniel Phillips in 1890. Here we go. There's Kingsport, where the trail starts on this map. And goes up to the Anderson Blockhouse site, through Gate City to Clinchport, to Duffield, to Cane Gap, over to Jonesville, Natural Bridge, over to Ewing, Martin Station, and into Cumberland Gap and to Middlesboro. Now the interesting thing about this is that Daniel Boone actually met a party further north up into Powell's Valley, now called Powell Valley, and his son was killed near Bristol, Tennessee, and they were driven back by Indians, and they ended up going to Clinch, which is now called Clinchville, and which is still north of here, and his family stayed there, and the governor wanted him to open up this trail, and he did that. But Daniel Boone, when he come back and got his family, I don't think he came back and went through Cumberland Gap. I think their destination at that time was actually to go through the Pound Gap, which at the time it was called the Sounding Gap. And the old folks in that area used to call that Old Cumberland Gap. And there was 13 families that settled in Letcher County, and about half of them were listed in Daniel Boone's party. And so that's even more evidence that Daniel Boone actually went through Pound Gap instead of the Cumberland Gap, and that was his destination when he was turned back and then worked on this trail. And I really believe that that was his destination when he picked up his family. There were several things in Letcher County. There was Boone's Creek of the North Fork of the Kentucky River, runs up through Neon, Kentucky. And supposedly there was a cabin there at one time that belonged to Daniel Boone. There were signs that used to be in the library and the courthouse in Letcher County that Daniel Boone had marked. There was marks at Kona, that marked where to turn on the Kentucky River. There was other marks at Sergent, and right on down. And if you follow that, you would jump across from Kona to Sergent, to, up to, into Thornton there, and across into Camp Branch, and then across the river to across the little gap there to Cars Fork, and then you pick up the Kentucky River there. And by doing that, it actually cut off about 75 miles of following the river. And right now in Winchester, Kentucky, there is a replica of Fort Boonesborough. And they admit that they don't know that the site of Fort Boonesborough. However, in Wolfe County, down around Jackson, there is a sulfur spring. Now, Boonesborough was supposedly built only about a mile from the sulfur spring. It was 100 miles from the Salt Lick, which is above Lexington, Kentucky. And so that puts it right in that area. Plus, there is a hill on the bend of the Kentucky River there that's called Boone's Hill. And so, very likely, Fort Boonesborough was located in Jackson, Kentucky, and not Winchester. Here we go. It says, when Daniel Boone was 12 years old, his father gave him a rifle, and within a few years he had become a legendary hunter, Indian fighter, and explorer. Now that's very true. But you got to understand that at the time it was not uncommon for 12-year-olds to be married and raising families. Well, that's something to think about too. All right, Wilderness Road Blockhouse. This recreation of the John Anderson Blockhouse is representative of fortifications manned by the Holston militia during conflicts between settlers and American Indians in the late 1770s. The blockhouse stood in East Carter's Valley near the intersection of pioneer roads coming down the Valley of Virginia, trails heading up into the Carolinas, and the Great Warrior's Path connecting the Holston and Ohio valleys. That great Warrior's Path that they're talking about, one branch of it ran up through Pound Valley, or Pound Gap, and split right there at Jenkins, and followed the Big Sandy River up into Ohio and Pennsylvania, and another section of it followed the Kentucky River and went down into central Kentucky. And so it's very likely that Daniel Boone was following one of the Great Warrior's Path to get to where Boonesborough was. Men, women, and children came here, waited, and gathered into groups before settling out for the West. And we're going to go look at some more things here. All right, again, we're here at Natural Tunnel State Park along US 23 in Virginia. And here we've got a map of the park area. Wildlife and safety. The natural world is a wild and wonderful place for relaxation, discovery, and recreation. Please be mindful of your surroundings and obey all trail safety signs. Help keep the wild and wildlife. Be cautious at dawn and dusk when animals are more active. Always keep your distance and do not feed or chase any wild animals. Prepare for forecasted weather and carry plenty of water, insect repellent, and sunscreen. Travel with a companion and keep children and pets near you. Enjoy your outdoor adventure. As you can see, that trail, it lists several trails through the park. Green is easy, moderate is blue, and black is physically demanding. The Lover's Leap Trail is marked in blue, and if I ain't mistaken, that's it right here. Natural Tunnel. There's Tunnel Hill Trail, which is orange. Quite a few things there. There's attention horseback riders, trail etiquette, several other things There's also longitude and latitude. I'll get in a little closer on those so you can see what they are. And you can see there's camp stores, restrooms, showers, swimming, tunnels, concessions, picnic shelters, cabins, dumping stations, points of interest, amphitheater, visitor centers, camping area, playground, parking, information, and park offices. And you can see it's a pretty big park. And sometime in the future, we'll come back and check this out a little more, especially on the weekend, so that we can ride the chairlift down to the tunnel, because I am no longer physically capable of doing something like that. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the train down here on the end and probably leave for the day. We're at Natural Tunnel, which is right outside Duffield, Virginia. And here we got a train. And the train says Natural Tunnel Railroad. And this train is what's called a 4-4-4 steam engine. It's got 4 in the front that leads the train, 4 in the middle that drives the train, and 4 in the rear that keeps the train aligned on the track. We're going to look at this signage over here. Now I can tell you one thing about this park, and I plan on stopping down here at the park office and letting them know. They need a sign up down there that says if you're handicapped, it's a waste of time to pay $5 to come and visit the park, because other than the parking area, there's nowhere you can get to. Alright, it's another pollinators thing. Reconnecting with natural areas, helping pollinators. Visiting Virginia state parks means connecting with nature to increase habitat diversity and help pollinators and native plants. We have reduced our mowing to improve your experience with nature. What may appear to be messy areas are actually native wildflower and warm season grass fields or forests beginning to grow, abuzz with pollinators and diversity of other insects and animals. Transformed areas now become outdoor classrooms, quiet places to relax, and great photography and research opportunities. By reducing mowed areas, we are creating colorful wildflower fields, supporting pollinators, controlling soil erosion, creating food and shelter for wildlife, and saving on lawn maintenance time and money. Be on the lookout for this symbol to see where Virginia state parks are working to create habitat diversity. Now this sign here is completely faded out. Something about steel something other of the world. So it has to do with this train, which is number 66. And we're going to go read about the train. Sign says 1 mile to the station. I got that really good up there at the visitor center. Says this engine was donated to Natural Tunnel State Park by George Barnett Jr. of Wise, Virginia. It was moved to the park from atop Little Stone Mountain near Northern Virginia in 1996. The locomotive was used for the Rimrock Railroad, which operated as a frontier town and tourist attraction in the late 60s and early 70s at the Rimrock Railroad and Recreation Area. Others responsible for this exhibit include George Honeycutt Sr. and Pepsi Incorporated of Norton, Tennessee Railfan Club, Kenny Fannin, and the Natural Tunnel State Park staff and volunteers. Sign says station 1 mile. Now we're going to walk up into the train itself. See, there's a little picnic area here. I sort of wonder what that, I wonder if that was a big grist mill, grist stone. We may go down there and look at it here in a moment. But that's what it looks like. It's got ridges cut into the top of it. And so it's probably in a grist mill to grind corn. But we'll go look at it here in a second. Here we are walking up into the train. Now, of course, this area of the train right here would have been used to store wood and coal. Wood or coal, depending on what the engine burned. And looks like they've taken a lot of the plumbing out here because it was actually more diverse here. And as small as that door is, you got a big door and a little door, but it may have been blocks of wood that this engine burned. And of course they've got that welded shut where you can't open and look at it. I think they ought to put a welded grill on the inside of it so you could look at it. There was the stick, the way you make the engine go forward and reverse. You can see there's several holes in the bottom here where they removed plumbing and everything. That was actually a boiler indicator. If you look at it really close, you could see the water level in there. And that was some sort of hydraulic something for it. But this cabin is made out of wood. And the seat's made out of wood. Could you imagine sitting on that 8 hours a day driving a train? Well, this is made out of wood. The outside made out of steel. This hopper is made out of steel. So it's just very interesting. And we're going to go down there and take a look at that grist stone. Because, like I said, I'm pretty sure that that is from a grist mill. They don't have any sign up on it, but I've seen them. If you ever go to Dollywood, they've actually got a working grist mill in there and you can buy flour out of it. One of the trails going up through there. A nice little picnic area here. Yep, that's what this is. It's a grist mill. Those grooves in the stone allowed the corn to set in there, and there'd be another rock that set on top of this that was grooved like that as well, and sometimes they would be flat. It just depended on how fine the meal was to be ground. But the meal would be dumped down I can't remember if it was on the outside or the inside, but it would be dumped down, and there was a special wheel went in there, and you can see they've got grooves cut out for that special axle. And these things would, you could put the corn down by the axle, and those grooves would drive the meal to the outside of the wheel. And that was usually the way they worked. And in some of them, depending on how they worked, it would actually drive it to the center. But that axle didn't fit that. It wasn't that big around. But there was cross pieces. You'll notice those holes. That one is not too deep. That one is about twice as deep. Not too deep, twice as deep. And those are actually wooden dowels that went through those axles so that it would turn this stone. And so you could dump the flour down in the middle and it would grind it out. And I think that was a top stone, not a bottom stone. The bottom stone was flat, and the top stone had the grooves in it, and the flour fell through and was ground out and pushed out to the outside.